With the release of Deafening Chord, this deck might actually be the best deck in Marvel Snap. Deafening Chord is a one-cost skill that afflicts an enemy at the location that it's played at with -1 power and reduces it to have no abilities at all. Now, this only happens if that card costs 3 or less, so there is some targeting on it, and there is one deck that benefits so heavily from having a cheap piece of interaction, and that deck is Victoria Hand. Victoria Hand benefits from Deafening Chord in the biggest possible way. Now, the biggest issue Victoria Hand has is the ability to manage its own hand size alongside a relative weakness to things that are able to go over the top of it. We're currently in a metagame where Shadow King deals with a lot of those things, but there is sort of an open slot in the deck, so to speak, that needs to be able to be doing something more than it has been. One of the biggest things that has held Victoria Hand back is that tech has gotten more expensive, and Victoria Hand is unable to accommodate that if you are on the Moon Girl game plan, which you should be because that's your engine. So, as Shang-Chi has gotten worse, as Enchantress has gotten more expensive, as Cosmic Ghost Rider has swung into the metagame, there have not been V-Hand decks that can accommodate those cards at their current costs. Even playing both Mercury and Shadow King is a little bit iffy because it's pretty hard to actually make that happen. And I think that kind of explanation really helps get to the core of why Deafening Chord is so damn good for this deck. It is cheap. It might not be a permanent solution, but the way this deck is constructed, it literally cannot run any of the other solutions. You cannot play Cosmic Ghost Rider in this deck. You will be making the deck worse. That is too expensive. It is taking you too far off of your game plan. You don't want to be doing it. You can play Deafening Chord, and really that's all that it is. This is a card that you can play without totally jacking up your entire game plan with clunky tech cards that you might need but maybe won't need. This card covers a wide range of scenarios. It is incredibly cheap. I cannot emphasize that enough. And just firing it off as a reasonable roadblock to just get space in your hand, that's going to happen a lot. This is a card that you do not need to get maximum value out of every time. In fact, sometimes it's better to fire it off early when your odds of hitting the thing you want to hit are better. Now, obviously this is contextual, but what V-Hand really likes about this card is it is a card that you want to dump out of your hand. It is a card that costs 1, so you can do 1 plus a Moon Girl if you need to get more cards out of your hand to actually make sure your Moon Girl hits your V-Hand. Everything this card is doing is something this deck wants. And this deck is already a powerful group of cards that has been lacking the interaction that other decks have in order to keep up in this metagame. Now, being a Shadow King and Deafening Chord deck, it feels like this deck has answers to so many different things, has such a good point output, and between those cards can really actually handle a lot of combo decks in this game. That's not always going to be true, but right now, this deck honestly just feels amazing. Hood Misery is a time-honored combination of cards, an extremely powerful thing to be doing, and Hood itself is a very, very reasonable card in terms of the rate that it's offering. You don't love... The worst thing about Hood is when you aren't able to Misery it. But unfortunately, there are going to be times where you just have to bite the bullet and say, I care more about this 6-power demon that is going to get buffed by my V-Hands. I care more about getting that in hand, multiplying it, things of that nature. The worst thing about that, though, isn't the -3. That's bad. But if it were just applied to the location, that would be one thing. The worst thing about it is the body, the space that it takes up. Which is why Misery is obviously so important, because it gets rid of that and turns it into an upside and all of that. But one of the hardest things about playing this deck is managing your board space. And when you don't have Misery, this is definitely a card that makes that job a lot harder. So I don't want to sit here and act like this is a bad card, but it is so much better with Misery than without Misery. And that board space stuff really matters. So do be thinking of that genuinely the entire game. Chord is great here in large part because it is a tech card that this deck can actually afford to play. And that is mostly not true of pretty much every other tech card. This deck cares so deeply about getting its curve low, and in order to make that happen, it cannot clunk itself up with a bunch of things that cost, frankly, more than 2. It's already a bit of a lift to get Shadow King into this deck, and you will notice that as you try to make Moon Girl stuff happen. You especially don't want tech cards that have to be held in order to get value. That is bad enough, and you notice it with Shadow King. That dynamic, not just that it's cost, but also that you don't want to play it early. This is the kind of card that you will get something out of playing early, and it is extremely cheap. It is quite important here. I've also already talked about board space. This deck takes great pains to care about board space a lot because it is a deck that is able to output a lot of bodies, but not necessarily go vertical with them as much as you would like. Now, it can do that, but this card not taking up board space is also important to making that better. Nico Minoru is a classic V-hand card, obviously the other way to get rid of the hood, either by destroying him or turning him into a demon yourself. Of course, the best thing you can do with Nico Minoru is to copy a Victoria hand. That's awesome, and you don't necessarily win every single time you do that, but when you start getting up to like 3-4 V-hands, that's a really good thing to be doing. Extremely powerful card, very, very, very strong. And on a personal note, I recently read all of the Runaways runs. I think I skipped maybe the one in 2007, and she's an awesome character too. And I really just didn't know that about her. I've talked about the struggles this deck has with energy, and they are largely helped greatly with Quinjet. Now, you might look at this deck and you're like, why does this deck struggle with energy? Everything in it is cheap. It struggles with energy because it has such a volume of cards, right? Your hand is going to be full a lot. There's going to be a lot of crap in your hand, which means that there's going to be in every game some unrealized point potential. This card helps you realize your point potential. It makes it much, much better to play Moon Girl and just get cheaper copies of the stuff in your hand that maybe get buffed by V-hand as well. That kind of stuff is greatly helped by Quinjet. Downside, it is a 1/2, and I've talked about board space, and that really does matter. Like, you have to be planning from the start of the game how you're going to distribute your power because you are very much capped on it. And so using the space, you have to play this card. I'm not telling you not to play this card. What I am telling you is to use your brain when doing positioning for this. It comes up a lot with Iron Patriot, where it's like, I really want to overload into this Iron Patriot lane. How do I do that without screwing myself over 3 turns down the line? That is the kind of thing that you're going to have to think about when you play a deck like this. Agony is your board space answer here. She also does some other stuff, right? Like you go Agony into V-hand into Frigga. But largely, this is just a card that gets you power without using a board space as much as you possibly can. And I really can't stress this part enough, costs 1. You have so many more good Moon Girls if you are able to set up a Moon Girl on 5 and getting a 1-cost card out of your hand on the same turn. That is why this deck cares so much about 1 cost. So Agony is serving sort of 3 masters here. First, the V-hand Frigga curve. It's great if you have an Agony. It's almost, not exactly, but it's pretty similar to like doing Nico copy V-hand Frigga, right? That's pretty cool. Second, having the ability to go tall in a lane without using a board space is something this deck cares deeply about. And finally, having the ability to simply cost 1 and get the hell out of your hand when you need specific things to copy, that's also really good. This obsession with cheap costs genuinely does mean that Iron Patriot is simultaneously less important and more important in this deck than he is in other decks. If you can make him happen, he can win you the game because the card will be cheap. But if you can't make him happen and the card is expensive, that can actually screw you up. You can lose games off of having like a 5 sitting in your hand and preventing you from getting enough cards out of your hand to double a V-hand. That kind of stuff really shows up with this card, especially when contrasted with the other sort of curvy 2-drop in this deck. which is, of course, Mirage, who is an absolute all-star. Mirage is always getting you something cheap. Always, always, always getting you something cheap and reasonably costed. There are so few decks against which a Mirage will not get you something that is easy to get out of your hand. An absolute all-star of a card. Mirage might genuinely be better than Iron Patriot in this deck. I really think that it fits with the principles we've been talking about here in a way that is much more clean than Iron Patriot's Feast or Famine, maybe I clunk up your entire hand gimmick. He is a more powerful card when he works, but there is a lot to be said for what Mirage is able to give you. A lot of the time, she'll get you something pretty close to the rate of a demon. The hand is a pretty good card, but I do think it's worth talking about what chased her out of the meta last time, and largely I would say that that thing is not necessarily having all the answers to a wide variety of combo decks. This is a deck that is very limited in terms of the amount of answers it can have, but when a metagame sort of solidifies to the point that you know you have the right answers in the deck, that is the kind of thing that makes this deck really, really powerful. And that's kind of what I view as happening right now. The combo decks are around, but they're not stressing different angles the way they were a few weeks ago. A few weeks ago, it was like, all right, am I going to need Mobius in here? Am I going to need Mercury in here? Am I going to need Shadow King in here? Am I going to need, there's a bunch of stuff that happens. But honestly, right now, not a lot of people are playing the decks that Mobius beats. And you kind of don't need him because of that. And obviously that is subject to change. You have this ability to kind of interact with things with Deafening Chord. He gives you a little bit of wide coverage, not like Cosmic Ghost Rider per se, but in that vein, and he can do things that are similarly powerful to Cosmic Ghost Rider while costing way, 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 way less. Right now, we have the right tech package for the metagame. The reason V-Hand falls out of favor is when harder tech is demanded, especially when that tech is more expensive. That's what kills this deck off. And that's the thing that I'd keep an eye out for if you're looking to play this. Frigga is a very cool card. I think the obvious thing you do with her is copy V-Hands, but Agony sort of makes her a better copy target for a lot of stuff, right? Like Agony, Iron Patriot, Frigga the Iron Patriot lane, because that's the only 3-drop you have, and you can't really count on being able to get the discount onto the Iron Patriot, so you can Frigga that. So you just get a 2/6, and you buff up your Iron Patriot lane, you get 10 power there, and you're just like, oh, wait, I'm actually happy with that, because that's a 2/6 that gets affected by Quinjet, that's a 2/6 that gets buffed by V-Hand, and you're just like, yeah, that's actually not really all that bad of a thing. Frigga does a lot of stuff here, right? Like, she's just kind of around and doing things. She's obviously part of your nut draw, but you do have some other little things that you can do with her, and you shouldn't be afraid. Like, if you think you're going to need to curve out, and it's like, well, I don't want to play Frigga in case I draw V-Hand, a lot of the time you're just supposed to play her because, you draw the V-Hand, you do your combo off curve, and it's just like very rarely actually going to be as good as you think it is. So sometimes you just have to bite the bullet and play not the greatest Frigga in the world, but a lot of the time she's just one of the best cards in this deck. Shadow King is your problem solver. You do not have a ton of green power. Agony does effectively convey green power. Nico Minoru occasionally conveys green power. But one of the advantages this deck gets as a mid-range deck is it has pretty good point output without being vulnerable to Shadow King, and it allows itself to play Shadow King. So, for example, let's say I was a zombie deck. Well, yeah, you could play Shadow King, but not only are you vulnerable to it, you end up having, maybe I screw myself over with this. I'm also more vulnerable to my opponent's version of this. This deck, not vulnerable to opposing Shadow Kings, very good at using Shadow King, and that is a good thing to be right now, because Shadow King is sort of the centralizing tech card of this metagame, thanks to move decks, thanks to zombie decks, thanks to man spider decks, thanks to, you could really just name a bunch of stuff at this point, destroy, whatever. He hits a lot of stuff. And because he hits a lot of stuff, and because this might be the best deck at using him, a lot of this deck is predicated on him existing. And it's a double-edged sword, right? We talked about what could cause this deck to get worse. The biggest things that could cause this deck to get worse is for the metagame to become less centralized around Shadow King. The more people need to diversify their answers, the less good Victoria Hand is. The more people don't need to diversify their answers, and especially the cheaper those answers are, the better Victoria Hand is. Right now, you have two really good, really cheap answers: Deafening Chord and Shadow King. Does that mean you're going to beat everybody? No, but it means you're in a really good position against a lot of stuff. Moon Girl is a core card in this deck, and that comes with upsides and downsides. The adoption of Moon Girl gives this deck a lot more juice, just fundamentally. And I think long-term, it is the right thing to do for this archetype, but if you don't play Moon Girl, a lot of the weaknesses I talked about are alleviated. If you aren't a Moon Girl deck, you can play this more expensive and clunkier tech if you have to. The thing is, in terms of metagame roles, you will likely not be the best mid-range deck at doing that thing. When we talk about what caused V-Hand to fall off, it was largely that. This dynamic of when there's a lot of diverse answers required, other mid-range decks are better at being that because of V-Hand, including Moon Girl. If you cut Moon Girl from V-Hand in order to make that happen, what you end up doing is largely playing a worse version of them. That is largely what has caused her decline. And of course, her precipitous rise now is in large part thanks to a centralized metagame where these two very cheap tech cards are extremely powerful. This allows Moon Girl to better enable you to do your stupid stuff that is kind of combo-esque in this deck, like stacking V-Hands and making large men. That's how this deck works, and that's why it's good now. Misery is a very strong card still. I do think it's important to contextualize this. This card is a hood bot. Like, she's in here to do that, right? This card is in here to destroy the hood and give you an extra demon. That is the entire point of it. Do you do other stuff with her? Yeah, I mean, sometimes you do like the V-Hand Frigga line, right? And then like on turn 4, you'll like get a Quinjet and play the V-Hand or whatever. And then you'll misery your Frigga to get another V-Hand copy. Like that kind of stuff happens too. Sometimes you'll do that. Sometimes instead of a demon, you'll use, instead of the hood, you'll use a Mirage. Yeah. Sometimes you'll follow up an Iron Patriot with this, right? Like, yeah, there's other stuff you do. But if we're being real, this is a hood bot. Like most of the time you play this card should be on the hood or in an empty lane on the final turn of the game. That's what this card is doing the vast majority of the time. And normally I wouldn't stress this, but Misery is a card that I think has been confusing to people. When she originally got buffed, they said she just wasn't doing well enough. And at high levels, everyone kind of gets that she's a hood bot. But I genuinely kind of think that part of the reason when Misery got buffed, part of the reason they buffed her, part of the reason they saw that in the data is just not enough people knew what she actually was, which is a hood bot, right? And if you're playing this deck at low levels and you're like, oh, well, why is Misery in here? I play her and she's not that good. It's like, because you're not playing her on the hood. It really is. That's what she does. Like, that is her role. That is her whole thing. And yeah, I mean, I think the fact that people didn't grasp that could be responsible for why she got buffed in the first place. She obviously didn't need it. She's still unbelievably good. All right, y'all. Thank you so much for watching. As always, I've been KMBest. You have been phenomenal. We're about to jump into some gameplay, and I will see you in the next one. Better than any other list I've played. Okay, I hear you, but also it sort of sounds like what you're saying is I played Spider-Man Noir in a deck that was good, and that felt better than the other Spider-Man Noir decks because it was a deck that was good. That's sort of what it sounds like you're saying. Also, I don't know where my untapped is. I don't know what happened to it. So I'm going to close it and see what happens. For the ones in the vid. I'm 6-1 with it, and I've played Noir once. Exactly what you want from this situation. I'm scared. Yeah, it is. It is from the old content creator event. Oh my god. Something like this. It's the Moon Girl is just for stats at this point. We'd rather it probably be anything other than that, but we should get 2 Sasquatches here. Potential Juggernaut here. They have a Sasquatch as well. What do you think about this? I think it's got to be this. And then this should win even through the Mirage here, yeah? Yeah. We're good. We'll take it. I don't think Zenaid's a Scar gamer. That's less in that location. Mills, get out of here. In the chat. Disgusting. How could you? How could you, my friend? They discard. Dodged it. you feel about that? The real question is, do we try for a chord here? It's like a 1 in 3. I don't think I do. Like, they have like a surfer here. This is 12 power. Like, we could just do this, right? Be like 7 moving in. We play 12. Because they have, like, let's say they have another guy here. They're going up probably an additional 16. I'm going to challenge, right? I think I'm going to do this because they don't expect it. Okay, good call by me. We're good. Would have tied the Walla. I know this is you. Who else could it be? Motherfucker. What kind of... That is also true. He hasn't shown up in my shop yet. Quake is the replacement. Oh, quaking, but that is... I don't know what's up. Galacti might be unwinnable. I think it also might be unwinnable, but what if... Have you considered Dr. Octopus cloning? Thought about it? Considered this? Considered potentially the greatest play of all time? I don't want to fire it now. Like, I kind of do. Right? It's objectively hilarious. I spend the last $50 in my bank account to help my homeless uncle buy zombie. Buy zombie Galactic. Alright, he's got 2 cards in hand. Buddy. Wow. It's a fucking nightmare. Oh, hold on. Hold on now. Behold the greatest play of all time. All right. Never seen no shit like this. Shuri? Yeah, but he can't now. You get it? He can't do the fucking zombie Galacti, Shuri. He doesn't have the ability. Yes! Victory! Yes! We've done it! We've Arishemed it! That's Chinese Elon. What's happening here is Chinese Eson. I guess we'll put it in air quotes. Clever take on that. Don't you mean Chinese song? I gotta tell you, man, I don't think that is what I mean. Yeah, we both invested here. That makes sense. Frigga's the card on the bottom. It's absolute. Okay. Wait, you didn't get discounted? What the hell? The hell? What the helly? Not getting rid of that fucking hood. I'll do. See, they snapped me here. What do we think about this? Yeah, that doesn't kill the hood. That's why I did that play.
I'm about to juice this up.
What do you think about this? It's about right to me. That's a big guy. Turns into a demon, you say? Goddamn. I'm pretty sure we win the right on the grounds of we play a bunch of big shit. Possible we under-indexed there. But I don't think we did. They just got shit on. I kind of feel like we can boomer. I feel like a boomer tells them to win.